What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. And as you can see, we got a new little setup here. Rearranged the room a little bit. Hope you guys enjoyed. I am sorry for this video taking so long. It's been a couple days, but you just need a couple of days to reflect after each chapter, to be honest. And last but not least, we are in chapter Charity, chapter 6. And I think it's been a wild journey. I think after this, it's just one more video, and we're going to be doing a book review. Hope you guys liked this read along. I've been using it every time that I've been driving, so kind of keeps these ideas fresh in the back of my mind. So trust me, like some of these things are just not lost or forgotten. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Chapter 6, Charity. William Morris wrote a poem called Love is Enough, and someone said to have reviewed it briefly in words, it isn't such has been the burden of this book. The natural loves are not self-sufficient, but something else. At first vaguely described as decency and common sense, but later revealed as goodness, and finally as the whole Christian life in one particular relation, must come to help of the mere feeling of the feeling is to be kept secret. To say this is not to belittle the natural loves, but to indicate where the real glory lies. It is no disparagement to a garden to say that it will not fence and weed itself, nor prune its own trees, nor roll and cut its own grass. A garden is a good thing, but that is not the sort of goodness it has. It will remain a garden, as distinct from a wilderness, only if someone does all these things to it. Its real glory is of quite a different kind. The very fact that it needs constant weeding and pruning bears witness to that glory. It teems with life, it glows with color, and it smells like heaven, and puts forward at every hour of a summer beauties which man could never have created, and could not even on his own resources have imagined. If you want to see the difference between its contribution and the gardener's, put the commonest weed. It grows side by side with his hoes, rakes, shears, and packet of weed killer. You have to put beauty, energy, and facility beside dead, sterile things. Just so are decency and common sense show gray and death-like besides the geniality of love. And when the garden is in its full glory, the gardener's contributions to that glory will still have been, in a sense, paltry compared with those of nature. Without life springing from earth, without rain, light, and heat descending from the sky, he could do nothing. When he has done all, he has merely encouraged here and discouraged there, powers and beauties that have a different source. But his share, though small, is indispensable and laborious. When God planted a garden, he set a man over it and set the man under himself. When he planted the garden of our nature and caused the flowering, fruiting loves to grow there, he set our will to dress them. Compared with them, it is dry and cold. Unless his grace comes down like the rain and sunshine, we shall use this tool to little purpose, but it is laborious and largely negative. Services are indispensable, but if they were needed when the garden was still in paradisal, how much more now when the soil has gone sour and the worst seeds seem to thrive on it best? But heaven forbid we should work in the spirit of prigs and stoics. While we hack and prune, we know very well what we are hacking and pruning is big with a splendor and vitality which our rational could never of itself have supplied. To liberate that splendor, to let it become fully what it is trying to be, to have tall trees instead of scrubby tangles and sweet apples instead of crabs, is part of our purpose. but only part. For now we must face a topic that I have been long postponed. Hitherto hardly anything has been said in this book about natural loves as rivals to the love of God, but now the question can no longer be avoided. There are two reasons for my delay. One, already hinted, is that this is the question not at the place which most of us need to begin. It is seldom at the outset addressed to our condition. For most of us, the true rivalry lies between the self and the human. Other not yet between human other and God. It is dangerous to press upon a man the duty of getting beyond earthly love when his real difficulty lies in getting so far. Many people do not find it really difficult to hate their wives or mothers. The danger of loving our fellow creatures too little was less present to their minds than that of loving them too idolatrously. In every wife, mother, and child, and friend they saw a possible rival to God. So of course does our Lord. Luke 14:26. That's something I definitely want to read later. Do not let your happiness depend on something you may lose. If love is to be a blessing, not a misery, it must be for those only beloved who will never pass away. Of course, this is an excellent sense. Do not put your goods in a leaky vessel. Don't spend too much on your house you may be turned out of. And there is no man alive who responds more naturally than I to such canny maxims. I am a safety-first creature. Of all arguments against love, none makes so strong an appeal to my nature as careful. This might lead you to suffering. To my nature, my temperament, yes, not to my science. When I respond to that appeal, I seem to myself to be 1,000 miles away from Christ. If I am so sure of anything, I am sure that his teaching was never meant to confirm my congenital preference for safe investments and limited liabilities. I doubt whether there is anything in me that pleases him less. And who could conceivably begin to love God on such a prudential ground because the security, so to speak, is better? Who could even include it among the grounds for loving? Would you choose a wife or a friend? If it comes to that, would you choose a dog in his spirit? One must be outside of the world of love, of all loves, before one thus calculates. Eros, lawless Eros, preferring the beloved to happiness, is more like love himself than this. I think that this passage in the Confessions is less a part of St. Augustine's Christendom than a hangover from the high-minded pagan philosophies in which he grew up in. It is closer to a Stoic apathy or Neoplatonic mysticism than to charity. We follow one who wept over Jerusalem and at the grave of Lazarus, and loving all, yet one disciple whom, in a special sense, he loved, St. Paul, has a higher authority with us than St. Augustine. St. Paul, who shows no sign that he would not have suffered like a man, and no feeling that he ought to have suffered, if Epaphroditus had died in Philem 2:27, even if it were granted that insurances against heartbreak were at our highest wisdom, does God himself offer them? Apparently not. Christ comes at last to say, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" There is no escape along the lines of St. Augustine suggests, nor along any other lines. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, and airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to a tragedy, or at least to the risk of a tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers, tribulations of love is hell. Damn. Wow, bro. Dude, C.S. Lewis fucking dropped a fucking banger on that one, bro. He dropped a banger, bro. He dropped a banger, bro. Let's read that shit again. There is no escape along the lines of St. Augustine suggests, nor along any other lines. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it up carefully, round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up in a safe, in the casket, or in a coffin of selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to a tragedy, or at least to the risk of a tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can perfectly be safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell. Damn, son, where'd you find this? This is some good shit, dude. This is some good literature. Some good ass literature, bro. Bro, do you even read, bro? All right, let's continue. I believe the most lawless and inordinate loves are less contrary to God's will than a self-invited and self-protective lovelessness. It is like hiding the talent in a napkin, and for much the same reason. I knew that thou wert a hard man. Christ did not teach and suffer that we might become, even in the natural loves, more careful of our own happiness. If a man is not calculative towards the earthly beloveds whom he has seen, he is none the more likely to be so towards God, whom he has not. We shall draw nearer to God, not by trying to avoid the sufferings and inherits in all loves, but by accepting them and offering them to them, throwing away all the defensive armor. If our hearts need to be broken, if he chooses this as the way in which they should break, then so be it. That's very insightful. That's very insightful indeed. So for real though, all jokes aside, I mean, love is abundance, and I'm glad that he's like, I mean, even on fucking page 172, he's still fucking drilling into me that God is love and love is God. And you gotta love in abundance. If you gotta be vulnerable to love, you gotta take care of love to be like a difference, you know? Like a garden is not a garden just because you call it a garden. I mean, it's like, you gotta fucking cut its grass, fence it in, make sure that you're pruning it right if you want to have a successful harvest. Like, I think a lot of the stuff that he's saying is hitting home to me. And, you know, I'm not lying. Like, this is my first time reading through this chapter. And this chapter is doing such a great job kind of wrapping some things up with some of the main themes that he was talking throughout the book. Anyway, I'll get more on my P's and Q's on my book review, so make sure you are subscribe and hit that noti bell so you can stay updated with any future uploads that I do. Please and thank you. All right, let's continue. That was hard. So, moving right along. Got only a couple pages left. Thus, God admitted to the human heart transforms not only gift love, but need love. Not only our need love of Him, but our need love of one another. This is of course not the only thing that can happen. He may come on what seems to us a more dreadful mission and demand that a natural love be totally renounced. A high, terrible vocation like Abraham's may constrain a man to turn his back on his own people and his father's house. Arrows directed to a forbidden object may have to be sacrificed. In such instances, the process, though hard to endure, is easy to understand. What we are more likely to overlook is the necessity for a transformation, even when the natural love is allowed to continue. In such a case, the divine love does not substitute itself for the natural. As if we had to throw away our silver to make room for the gold, the natural loves are summoned to become modes of charity, while also remaining the natural loves that they were. One sees here at once a sort of echo or rhyme or corollary to the incarnation itself, and this need not surprise us, for the author of both is the same. A Christ is perfect God and perfect man. The natural loves are called to become perfect charity and also perfect natural loves, as God becomes a man, not by conversation of the Godhead into flesh, but by taking of the manhood into God. So here, charity does not dwindle into merely natural love, but natural love is taken up into, made the tuned and obedient instrument of love himself. How this can happen, most Christians know. All the activity, sins only accepted, of the natural loves can in a favorite hour become works of the glad and shameless and grateful, need love, or of the selfless, unofficious give love, which are both charity. Nothing is either too trivial or too animal to be thus transformed. A game, a joke, a drink together, idle chat, a walk, the act of Venus, all of these can be modes in which we forgive or accept forgiveness, in which console or reconciled, in which we seek not our own. Thus, in every instincts, appetites, and recreations, love has prepared for himself a body. But I said, in a favored hour, hours soon pass, the total secure transformation of a natural love into a mode of charity is a work so difficult that perhaps no fallen man has ever come within sight of doing it perfectly. Yet the law that loves must be so transformed is, I suppose, inexorable. One difficulty is that here, as usual, we can take a wrong turn. A Christian, a somewhat too vocally Christian, circle or family, having grasped this principle, can make a show in their overt behavior, and especially in their words, of having achieved the thing itself, an elaborate, fussy, embarrassing, and intolerable show. Such people make every trifle a matter of explicitly spiritual importance, out loud and to one another. To God on their knees behind closed doors, it would be another matter. They are always unnecessarily asking or insufferably offering forgiveness. Who would not rather live with those ordinary people who get over their tantrums and ours, unapathetically letting a meal, a night's sleep, or a joke mend all? The real work must be, of all our works, the most secret, even as far as possible secret from ourselves. Our right hand must not know what our left is doing. We have not got far enough if we play a game of cards with the children merely to amuse them or to show that they are forgiven. If this is the best we can do, we are right to do it. But it would be better if a deeper, less conscious charity threw us into a frame of mind in which a little fun with the children was the same thing we would at that moment like best. We are, however, much helped in this necessary work by the very feature of our experience at which we are most repine. The invitation to turn our natural loves into charity is never lacking. It is providing by those frictions and frustrations that meet us in all of them. Unmistakable evidence that natural love is not going to be enough. Unmistakable unless we are blinded by egotism. When we are used them absurdly. If only I had been more fortunate in my children. That boy gets more like his father every day. I could have loved him perfectly. But every child is sometimes infuriating. Most children are not infrequently odious. If only my husband were considerate, less lazy, less extravagant, if only my wife had fewer moods and more sense and were less extravagant, If my father wasn't so infernally prosy and close-fisted, but in everyone, and of course in ourselves, there is that which requires forbearance, tolerance, forgiveness. The necessity of practicing these virtues first force us upon the attempt to turn, more strictly to let God turn our love into charity. These frets and rubs are beneficial. It may even be that where there were fewest of them, the conversation of natural love is most difficult. When they are plentiful, the necessity of rising above it is obvious. To rise above it when it is fully satisfied and as little impeded as earthly conditions allow, to see that we must rise when all seems so well already, this may require a subtler conversion, a more delicate insight. In this way, also, it may be hard for the rich to enter the kingdom. And yet, I believe the necessity for the conversation is inexorable. At least, if our natural loves are to enter the heavenly life, that they can enter it, most of us, in fact, believe. We may hope that the resurrection of the body means also the resurrection of what may be called our greater body, the general fabric of our earthly life with its affections and relationships, but only on one condition. Not a condition arbitrary laid down by God, but one necessarily inherent in the character of heaven. Nothing can enter there which cannot become heavenly. Flesh and blood, mere nature, cannot inherit that kingdom. Man can ascend to heaven only because the Christ who died and ascended to heaven is formed in him. We must not suppose that the same is true of a man's love. Only those into which love himself has entered will ascend to love himself, and these can be raised with him only if they have, in some degree, shared his death. If the natural element in them has submitted year after year, or in sudden agony, to transmutation, the fashion of this world passes away. The very name of nature implies the transitionary. Natural loves can hope for eternity only in so far as they allow themselves to be taken into the eternity of charity, have at least allowed the process to begin here on earth. Before the night comes when no man can work, the process will always involve a kind of death. There is no escape. In my love for my wife or friend, the only eternal element is transforming presence of love himself. By that presence, if at all, the other elements may hope, as our physical bodies hope, to be raised from the dead, for this is the only holy in them. This only is the Lord. Theologians have sometimes asked whether we shall know one another in heaven, and whether the particular love relations worked out on earth would then continue to have any significance. It seems reasonable to reply, it may depend what kind of love had become or was becoming on earth. For surely to meet in the eternal world someone for whom your love in this, however strong, had been merely natural would not be, on that ground, even interesting. Would it be like meeting in an adult life someone who had already seemed to have a great friend at your preparatory school solely because of a common interest in occupations? If there was nothing more, if he had not a kindred soul, he will now be a total stranger. Neither of you now play conkers. You no longer want to swope your help with his French exercise for his help with your arithmetic. In heaven, I suspect a love that had never embodied love himself would be equally irrelevant, for nature has passed away. All that is not internal is internally out of date. But I must not end on this note. I dare not, and the less because the longings and terrors of my own prompt me to do so. Leave any bereaved or desolate reader confirmed in widespread illusion that reunion with loved dead is the goal of the Christian life. The denial of this may sound harsh and unreal in the ears of broken-hearted, but it must be denied. Thou hast made for us thyself, said St. Augustine, and our heart has no rest till it comes to thee. This is so easy to believe for a brief moment before the altar, or perhaps half praying, half meditating in an April wood. Sounds like a mockery beside deathbed. But we shall be far more truly mocked if, casting this way, we pin our comfort on the hope, perhaps even with the aid of the seance and necromancy, of some day this time forever enjoying the earthly beloved again and no more. It is hard not to imagine that such an endless prolongation of earthly happiness would be completely satisfying. But if I may trust my own experience, we get at once a sharp warning that there is something wrong. The moment we attempt to use our faith in the other world for this purpose, that faith weakens. The moment in my life when it was really strong have all been moments when God himself was central in my thoughts. Believing in him, I could then believe in heaven as a corollary. But the reverse process, believing first in reunion with the beloved, and then for the sake of the reunion, believing in heaven, and finally for the sake of heaven, believing in God, this will not work. One can of course imagine things, but a self-critical person will soon be increasingly aware that the imagination at work is his own. He knows he is only weavering in fantasy, and simpler souls will find the phantoms that they try to feed on void of all comfort and nourishment, only to be stimulated into some semblance of reality by pitiful efforts of self-hypnotism, and perhaps by the aid of ignoble pictures and hymns, and what is worse, witches. We find thus by experience that there is no good applying to heaven for earthly comfort. Heaven can give heavenly comfort, no other kind, and earth cannot give earthly comfort either. There is no earthly comfort in the long run. For the dream of finding our end, the thing we were made for in heaven, of purely human love, could not be true unless our whole faith were wrong. We were made for God only by being in some respect like him, only by being a manifestation of his beauty, lovingness, kindness, wisdom, or goodness has any earthly beloved excited our love. It is not that we have loved them too much, but that we did not quite understand what we were loving. It is not that we shall be asked to turn from them, so dearly familiar to a stranger. When we see the face of God, we shall know what we have always known it. He has been a party to, has made, sustained, and moved moment by moment within all of our earthly experience of innocent love. All that was true love in them was even on earth far more than ours, and ours only because his. In heaven there will be no anguish and no duty of turning away from our earthly beloveds. First, because we shall have turned already from the portrait to the original, from the rivulets to the fountain, from the creatures he made lovable to love himself. But secondly, because we shall find them all in him. By loving him more than them, we shall love them more than we do now. But all that is far away in the land of Trinity, not here in exile, in the weeping valley. Down here, it is all loss and renunciation. The very purpose of bereavement, so far as it affects ourselves, may have been forced this upon us. We are then compelled to believe that we cannot yet feel that God is our true beloved. That is why bereavement is in ways easier for the unbeliever than for us. He can storm and rage and shake his fist at the universe, and if he is a genius, write poems like Huysmans or Hardy's. But we, at our lowest ebb, when the least effort seems too much for us, must begin to attempt what seems impossibilities. Is it easy to love God? Asks an old author. It is easy, he replies, to those who do it. I have included 2 graces under the word charity, but God can give a third. He can awake in man towards himself a supernatural appreciative love. This is of all gifts the most to be desired. Here, not in our natural loves, nor even in ethics, lies the true center of all human angelic life. With this, all things are possible. And with this, where a better book would begin, mine must end. I dare not to proceed. God knows, not I, whether I have ever tasted his love. Perhaps I have only imagined the tasting. Those, like myself, whose imagination far exceeds their obedience, are subject to a just penalty. We easily imagine conditions far higher than any that we have really reached. If we describe what we have imagined, we may make others and make ourselves believe that we have really been there. And if I have only imagined it, is it a further delusion that even the imagining has at some point, some moments, made all other objects of desire? Yes, even peace, even to have no more fears, look like broken toys and faded flowers. Perhaps for many of us, all experience merely defines, so to speak, the shape of what gap where our love of God ought to be. It is not enough. It is something. If we cannot practice the presence of God, it is something to practice the absence of God, to become increasingly aware of our unawareness till we feel like men who should stand beside a great cataract and hear no noise, or like a man in a story who looks in a mirror and finds no face there, or a man in a dream who stretches out his hands to visible objects and gets no sensation to touch. To know that one is dreaming is to no longer perfectly asleep. But for news of the fully waking world, you must go to my betters. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that was the end of The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. It was a long ride, and I apologize if some of the reading was a little bit incoherent. Stay tuned for a book review coming up, and I'm going to be kind of reflecting on it. Maybe by the end of the year, I'll look back on these videos and tell you what I found, tell you what I've practiced. And if you guys enjoyed this book series and you guys want to see more of it, make sure you let me know in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe, hit that noti bell, and I'll see you guys later. Deuces.